OCC is now trying to squeeze out the state presence to prevent us from protecting consumers, which I think is ultimately very injurious to consumers.
Eliot Spitzer is the Attorney General of New York State.
We get thousands of complaints every year about credit card issues relating to the major banks, the major card issuers. And so we get these complaints and we try to deal with the credit card companies. But increasingly over the past number of years, what we have heard back from the major banks in a variety of contexts is that we don't need to deal with you because the OCC has told us, indeed has directed us, not to deal with state enforcement entities.
Isn't this just a turf battle between the states and a federal agency?
It's a one-way turf battle. And by that what I mean is we are more than happy to acknowledge that the OCC has jurisdiction across the financial system when it comes to certain issues. What the OCC is trying to do is squeeze the states out in the one area where we have been incredibly useful, which is consumer protection.
The state attorneys general, Mr. Spitzer and others, say that people in our state know who we are. We have a consumer complaint office. And our beef is that you guys, the OCC, want to push them out of the business of consumer complaints.
We don't want to push them out of the business. We are both there protecting consumers. What we have been striving to do is to individually and in developing arrangements with the states, work out the best way to work cooperatively with them.
In January of 2004, the OCC declared itself the exclusive regulator of all the national banks, effectively immunizing the big credit card issuers from most state consumer protection laws. The OCC cited the Providian case as proof of its commitment to consumers.
I was dismayed that they used Providian as the prime example of their ability and their will to enforce the laws that pertain to consumers.
To you, they weren't the white knight who came into San Francisco and saved consumers from Providian.
No, we were.
Since the Providian case, the OCC says it has been more aggressive, recently issuing an advisory admonishing the banks for misleading the public about practices like 0% introductory rates and universal default.
The OCC itself has acknowledged that these practices are, as they describe it, very troubling. But notice what they didn't do. They didn't say, and we're going to prohibit them, stop them. Those are unfair practices. They are unsafe and unsound, and don't do them. Instead, they said, it's a problem. Look, if they think it's a problem, then tell the credit card companies to stop doing it.
Why don't you simply stop them? Why don't you ban these practices?
When we see practices that are potentially problematic, we take a variety of actions.
So you could tell them to stop and they would have to do it.
If we had a basis for concluding that a bank was involved in a practice that was unfair or deceptive, if it violated any of the other many consumer protection standards that apply to them, we can tell them to stop it immediately.
Whatever the OCC is doing, Pat Wallace says it hasn't stopped the Better Business Bureau from being deluged with complaints.
It's not an accident that the banking credit card business generates more complaints nationally across the country than any other industry. Now, what does that say to you? Out of 1,000 industries that we track, they're number one. I'd say there's a problem here. These things aren't an anomaly. All these complaints have some basis in fact. There are irritated, unhappy, dissatisfied customers in this industry, and we see it.
The Better Business Bureau tells us credit cards and banking and credit cards together, number one problem.
Of all types of complaints?
Yeah.
I would have thought it was like cable satellite installation.
No, I guess
or
you guys,
used car dealers.
Your
or
members
something.
apparently are amongst them.
That's I would not have thought that that was the case.